Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what's happened this year. There's been really a ton of things that have been going on in the realm of development. There's been a ton of stuff that's happened in the last year on Eterna in developing our platform and whatnot. So I kind of want to take a moment to look at what's gone on and also kind of where we might head in the future. Some current plans and some kind of more aspirational future thinking things. So starting in the end of last year, I wound up grouping these together a little bit because there wasn't a ton that happened, but some really important things, including some initial features for ribosome design that got included, like the colored rings and the introduction of this explosion factor as the initial way of dealing with kind of large RNAs. Fusion tables that we were relying on for our data browser went away, so we had to migrate off of fusion tables. That happened, and we have all that migrated and the data saved, and the data browser all still works. And we updated part of our Eterna.js code to a really nice thing is kind of we had all of our dependencies with the folding engines. Really, we had a bunch of modifications, but it wasn't really well tracked of how what the modifications were. So thanks to Andy Watkins, we adjusted it so that we could better track those kind of things. And improve our process for being able to do things like upgrading our energy models, which is potentially a really important thing for us to be able to do, and we've already taken advantage of. And also in the ability to do things like add new energy models. Then moving towards the beginning of this year, a really big step we made was making the Eterna.js source publicly available for anyone to be able to look at and use and modify. And along with that, at the same time, we had our first developer bootcamp where anyone could kind of come in and get acquainted with our code and learn how to contribute. And another thing, thanks to Andy Watkins, is the initial introduction of pseudoknots in Eterna. So we have the ability, we haven't widely used it yet, but we finally have the ability to model these complex interactions in Eterna. And then as we came on to Q2, the big thing here, of course, was our website refresh. So we completely rewrote our website front end with a fresh new design, thanks to Sharif, and made just sweeping improvements there, something that works for mobile, and getting us off of a really super old technology platform that was really hard to work with to really help us make future improvements much easier, as well as just the make things more modern and a better general user experience. On the backend side, we have new API documentation, a number of improvements in our backend code to just kind of improve, I'll say, code hygiene, just making things easier to kind of work with and more standards compliant, as well as making some really great performance improvements that just make everything on Eterna quite a bit faster. It was actually really surprising, as well as we also added some monitoring to really help us understand what's going on and to better track any potential issues and things of that nature. We moved towards infrastructure as code with our infrastructure, so we're able to better document our things like our servers and make it easier for us when we're creating new servers or things of that nature, that everything is more automated. It's easier to understand to see at a glance kind of what's going on and to kind of get started with that kind of thing. And again, the automation for doing things like, we're starting to do things like making our website deployments kind of being more automated, so there's less manual intervention from us, which is easier for, again, for people to get involved without manual intervention from me, as well as just kind of, it's just a nice workflow improvement. Our website is now auto-scaling, so as we get more activity, we're able to dynamically increase and decrease the number of, more or less activity, we are able to increase and decrease the number of servers we're using, which is super nice. We have a brand new mail server, so we have @eternagame.org email addresses, including a new support address that we're going to be starting to use more soon, which just kind of adds a nice little level of professionalism, and we're going to start rolling that out for things like email notifications and account-related emails. Our new, I said forums, as GetSat also went by the wayside this year. We finally migrated to our new discourse-based forums, which is super pretty. The usability is so much better. There's all these new features that we can take advantage of, which has been tremendous. And I think we're really just kind of starting to really appreciate them. We revisited Nova Labs. They were still using Flash, and we finally got to the point of getting them off of Flash, as well as adding some of the improvements that never made it into Eterna from Nova. Those have now been implemented, so there's a number of benefits that we now have. Mobile support. This is huge. We have our new mobile apps that are now officially out on both Android and iOS, and usability on the website. There's still some things that to be improved. Really, right now it's targeted at the tutorials, and we still have more work to do for the rest of the game. But we're much closer than we were, and the playability on mobile has greatly improved. The design of the Eterna game there's been a number of design improvements from Sharif that have just kind of added a new layer of polish and moving in a direction towards modernizing also the UI on the game, and making a number of quality of life improvements there. And everything just kind of looks a lot prettier with a bit of shoe shine. And again, more features for large RNAs, including things like the jump to nucleotide and being able to hide bases, and the new non-overlapping layout that Andrew the RNA puzzler layout that Andrew integrated, so that you can get an almost clash-free layout for these large RNAs. We kind of alluded to it, I think, at a couple points, but we should probably be a little bit more explicit about this. Is that if you hit, I believe, the L key, L for layout, in a puzzle, you'll be able to get an alternate layout which kind of spreads out the RNA a little bit more, which will basically, in most cases, on where these ribosome puzzles, or there's tons of overlaps, it significantly improves that to the point where there's very few overlaps. There's still a little bit there, but it's drastically improved. And we have our new folding engines here as well, with EternaFold and ContraFold, LinearFold E, LinearFold C are now available in the game for everyone to use, especially, and with EternaFold especially, this is so exciting to really be able to bring our design skills to the next level. To answer Henry's question, the RNA puzzler layout is different from the explosion factor, where the explosion factor just kind of expands the RNA uniformly. The RNA puzzler layout, actually, basically what it does is it takes loops and just makes the loops wider. So it doesn't do these weird things to the layout where you can't tell where the stacks are or anything. It's significantly better than purely the explosion factor. And in fact, it's possible that in time we may wind up finding that we won't have the need for the explosion factor anymore, which was always intended as kind of a really quick hack because that was easy to do to resolve these layout issues, but it's really not ideal. And moving forward, some things that are immediately kind of on deck in the next, hopefully, couple months, if not sooner. We have, thanks to Alex Halb from the community, we have, with initial work being done by Gaijiva Masterstormer, a brand new version of the chat. You may notice that things are already a little bit different, but we have some new version of the chat with a much nicer code base and some really fantastic features and really nice UI. There's a new version of the design browser UI in-game that looks absolutely beautiful with a number of quality of life improvements as well. There's a massive performance improvement in the game thanks to, again, Andy Watkins, who has, with an upgrade to the newest version of Pixie, which is our core graphics library, we've seen 200 to 400x or 200 to 400% improvement in performance. So those giant ribosome puzzles where previously they would just kind of jitter around the screen, it's actually significantly more playable, which is really, really awesome to see. And another thing that he's done is help to improve some aspects of our code to make it much less likely to cause bugs, and a number of things that are easier for us to be adding features with better code discoverability with improved typing in particular. Another thing that we've been asked by SciStarter to implement their API. So we're going to be soon. I've been tasked with adding an integration with SciStarter to be able to track things on their website, which will also allow us them for a number of programs that they run and a number of collaborations that they have that will hopefully be able to bring additional people from their communities, their connections to Eterna. Something else that has been kind of sitting for a while that I just haven't gotten to actually getting deployed yet, but will be coming soon, an improved experience with scripts, thanks to MasterStormer, where you'll be able to favorite scripts, so you won't have this arbitrary limit of scripts in your script list, and where you have to copy scripts. That will be a thing of the past, where you'll be able to simply favorite a script and just kind of agree to a couple things, and you'll be able to basically just see those scripts directly in the UI, which will be super nice. And additionally, one of the things I'll be looking into soon as well is some project management tools to improve our internal tracking of things, so that everyone in the community can see what is currently getting worked on, as well as just as we're trying to plan out the future of Eterna and what it looks like, that will be able to help us really keep track of things. And if we, as we might expand our team, like in the situation we had the past few months, where we had a number of people on, that will help us really guide people better, and also guide potential community contributors as well with what the types of things that they can do. And big thank you to the interim staff that we brought on over the past few months. Abhi and Austin, who are working on our new front end with the basic work that was done by Guy. Amin, who did all of the improvements to Eterna.js. Tomas, who was working on improving our back end, that was to be able to improve our performance and support the new front end. Kevin, who is working on our servers and related infrastructure and getting our automation stuff set up. Johannes from Eat, Create, Sleep, who created the wrapper for mobile and was doing some work on making the Eterna game work on mobile devices, as well as also Danny, who joined us for a while to help with our social media presence and PR approach and things of that nature, and helping us make contacts and things of that nature, which was really great. And thank you to also all the other contributors. Of course, Sharif, who has been with us for some time as doing design and graphics work. He's been absolutely instrumental. Andy Watkins, who's been increasingly doing more and more with the game itself. He's been a huge help. Guy, who is doing who did a bunch of fundamental work, as well as some things with, like, for example, the colored rings. That was thanks to him. And as well as a number of people that you may or may not recognize, who have contributed to our open repositories on GitHub, which has been, having those contributions has been absolutely wonderful. Looking forward though, what does the future of Eterna look like? Now, as far as some immediate plans, we do have Eterna 3D that will be coming up, because we're getting some resources to be able to look into that, which will be really super cool. And in order to do that, there's some other stuff that will be really great that we need to work on anyways, but this gives us a great kind of excuse, if you will, to do. Reworking some of the code in the game itself right now there's a lot of issues that make it hard to extend and add new features, and just a number of things where it's just really kind of hard to work with the code. And Andy has already started working on making a lot of these kind of improvements, and hopefully we'll be able to really get the code base to a place where it'll be much easier to iterate on, as well as reworking the user interface for Eterna.js for the game, to be able to better handle to further help with smaller screens, as well as support a lot of new features that we might wind up adding. Internationalization is the next thing, which I think is Ome's point. That's one thing that we're looking at, how we've kind of started on some of that work, where in our website there's been some fundamental work for supporting being able to work with multiple languages, but there's still a lot of work to be done with that, for actually doing the translations, finishing the support on the website, supporting it in Eterna.js, and there's a number of stuff in a number of aspects of our backend as well that need to support multiple languages. And there's a lot of work to be done there, so we're looking into we'll see if this winds up really happening in the near term. But from my understanding, there's been a bunch of looking into resources for how we might be able to accomplish this, as well as kind of our last thing that we need to do to kind of really modernize our infrastructure is working on our backend. We need to it's still pretty old and needs to be rewritten with modern tools and modern techniques and approaches, and also as it's grown over time, there's a lot with the architecture that needs to be improved. So again, this is one of those where I'm not sure if this will be particularly near term, but there is a possibility that it could be, depending on how things play out. But beyond that, so there's some kind of these immediate kind of concerns, and a couple of things that are a little bit more fundamental, like working on improving the code so that we can make improvements. But when we're really looking into the future, that what do we want Eterna to look like beyond just like, okay, so once we can do kind of some of the hard tasks of getting to the point where Eterna's code base is no longer fragile in particular, where should we be focusing our attention? And I was talking to in particular Broad last night, as well as Haglahu and Ronald a little bit as well in that discussion. And I realized that we can kind of look at Eterna in three ways. So the original intent of Eterna, of course, was as a game, is that you can just have fun playing this game, and by the nature of the way that the game's designed, you can contribute to science. But over time, things have changed on Eterna a little bit, and we've gotten to the point where you have this idea of you can in many ways strip away the game, and you still have a way, you just simply have a way for those without scientific knowledge to be able to contribute to science in a meaningful way. So you could pull out the points and the badges, but you still have a way where you can come in with no scientific knowledge and contribute to science in a meaningful way, just because of the way we abstract things. And you could look at and say, well, that's one potential. That's another way of looking at it. And additionally, there's the potential for Eterna to be a really powerful tool for professionals in science and research. And being able to support that, I think we're not really built for that, but there's a lot we could do to get there. So I kind of see this as somewhat of a continuum of, we could potentially focus in on one area where we're only a game. We hyper focus on the abstractions, or we could be just a research tool, or we could say, well, we're going to kind of ignore the researchers, we're going to forget about the game, and we're really just going to focus on the science, making science accessible, because that's the direction we're going. It's worked really well. But I think really the approach that we should be taking is doing all of these. Now, it's a little bit difficult because you'll be splitting your attention, and you want to be careful about that. But I think there's really important things to be gained from each of these areas, and I think we should be doing what we can to really support each of them to the utmost. And I think they wind up supporting each other as well. So starting off with the game aspect of Eterna, I think many of us feel that in the past, over the past, even back to 2015, I remember at EternaCon 2015 that I talked to another player, and the comment was made that a lot of people have left because they felt that that things had become too focused on science, and that it was no longer fun, that the game was no longer there. And I think this has only become truer over time, where, I mean, to some degree, we still do great science, and we're still, in many ways, largely accessible. We're accessible to people without scientific knowledge in a unique way. But for some time, we haven't really focused on the game itself. And the benefit of doing this is that we can throw a wider net, get more people involved, and keep people engaged in Eterna. When hard science is hard science, that's not for everyone. Even if you do abstract some things away, sometimes there's benefit to just providing a fun experience. And we can really spend some time working on the game design around Eterna, really thinking about, well, what we're doing now, because even now there's very few really real game elements that have remained in Eterna just because we just haven't spent time with it. And as the type of work that we've done on Eterna has changed, what a game needs to look like has also changed. So we need to really focus some time on what can we really do to make a good game with Eterna, and what things can we do to make it more fun? How should our reward systems work? How should we be, because games aren't all about points, badges, and leaderboards. And there's actually a really good book about this called Actionable Gamification that talks about how gamification is more than just points, badges, and leaderboard. And there's so much more to engagement. But reward systems is an important part of many games. And that's something else that, we really do need to revisit. We've talked about that a lot over the years. And I think it's important to consider this idea of casual contribution that you get from a game is that you can just kind of, and it's really nice to be able to say, hey, I've had a long day at work, or I've had a long day at school. I just want to come in and I want to play for 10 minutes and have this relaxing experience of Eterna. And also, but at the same time, with that little bit of time that you have to really, and as you're having fun, to be able to contribute. And using the idea of, I'll say, human intelligence of, you can have trained scientists, and yes, I mean, that's human intelligence, sure, but there are things that just humans are really good at that computers are not. That's the whole idea behind citizen science games, that we can turn them into just tasks that are easy for humans, that are more natural for humans to perform, and really take advantage of that. And I think there's benefits into kind of going back to our roots in that regard. And then looking kind of at the center part of the spectrum of how can we make the science accessible, and how can we make the game accessible as well. So, we don't do a great job. In particular, I know a lot of us have talked about this, is that there's a lot of work to be done in our tutorials where, it's very difficult, and, they're very long, and they don't even necessarily teach all the concepts very well, and they're not thorough enough. They're not talking about all the different aspects of Eterna. And there's definitely a lot more to be done there to teach, to get people, again, the whole point is getting people without the knowledge to be able to have the knowledge they need to be able to really contribute. And also, this is an important part of also keeping people in, is when, there's a lot of people who get discouraged by starting through the tutorials, and, they're not given enough to really be able to thrive. So it's important for us to really focus on that. And that's also an important part for the game as well, is you need to have, even if it was just a game, being able to make sure that people are able to be onboarded is important. But as far as kind of looking more towards the science and making the science successful, there's probably also more we should be doing about teaching the science as well, and providing the opportunities for people to learn and to be able to easily find the resources they need. And then additionally, provide an important part of this, providing a platform that allow people without the knowledge to be able to contribute to science, is there's more that we can do with abstracting the problems away. Right now, there's still a lot of players who are looking at the papers and really digging into doing a lot of hypothesis and looking at raw data, and that's great, and we should support that. But at the same time, there's so much more that we could do to just take these really difficult elements and turn them into things that are easier for people to understand without having to go to that level, but also allowing players to strip away the layers and to dig deeper as they want to. And that's the point of progressive disclosure, is that you can keep going deeper and getting to the more powerful tools, but there's a level on top where you can still do meaningful work without having to go that far. And you can just kind of naturally flow from one to the other. And then finally, one thing that we've talked about is access and opportunity, where there's a number of people, for various reasons, are not able to have access to Eterna because, of technological limitations. For, maybe they don't have, especially like when we're talking about things like third world countries where, they'll only have mobile phones, or, you don't have the money to have a powerful computer or whatever to do the advanced puzzles, or the really large puzzles, or things like internationalization where you're in other countries. We want to be able to, if people can't understand our content that we're providing, then they're potentially getting locked out. So it's important for us to be able to provide for that. And for those with and as far as traditional accessibility concerns, as simple as color blindness, or things like, we do have individuals in our community who have limitations with hearing, which I know has something that's been coming up more, and other different things to consider of how can we make sure that nobody is getting, that everyone is able to really engage in Eterna in a way where we're not, even though it's not necessarily intended, that the way that we're built is not blocking people out. And then going to the last point of what can we do to make Eterna a more powerful research tool? So we can do more to provide more powerful tools. And I'll say again, this goes back to the previous point. Again, these are all connected. Is there's so much more we can provide to players where I know I talked to Broad about this, is that there's a lot of things that players might be doing that can be relegated to algorithms and can be relegated to tools, so that humans can do what they're best at, of really thinking through problems and coming up with creative solutions. And there's a lot that we could do to improve on that, as well as this makes for a really powerful tool for researchers too, is if we can just give them an interface to work in where they can say, here's the problem I'm trying to solve, and I have the tools to be able to do this. This is powerful for both citizen scientists and for researchers. And this idea of being batteries included, we have developed so many tools and technologies on Eterna, and being able to integrate all those, as well as other available technologies, is a really powerful thing, as well as the ability to let our platform be flexible and extensible. So when people have additional ideas, that they can experiment with them. And when they have ideas for new tools, they can do that. Or in industry, when they have their own internal tools, that they can take advantage of them along with our tool set and have them be integrated. As well as for an industry setting, it is a different workflow. We can't just ship them the Eterna website as is. We can't, even things like Eterna.js, where it's been used for that purpose in the past for kind of professional research, but there's a lot we can do to improve the way that things are structured so that it can work both in our setting as well, really work in a research setting. So what does this concretely mean for Eterna development? So there's some technical challenges, of course. We have to work on our back end. The Eterna.js, the game code base needs some work. We still have a little bit of work to do to modernize our servers and infrastructure. And then we actually, once we have a kind of that ground level stuff done, we still have to, we have all these types of things that we want to implement on top. And there's been many ideas over the years from the code, from the player base rather, on things that we could do that would make their lives better and would make it more enjoyable, make them more effective, and all of these things, make the learning easier. And we actually, once we're in the place where we still need to do it, of course. And then there's many design challenges as well. So when we're talking about creating better tutorials and creating better learning materials, that's a really hard instructional design problem, as we found out. Doing game design and looking at new ways that our gameplay could work. Discovering the available resources for players and the way that they're structured, that's the taxonomy, is the way that things are structured, to be able to make it easier for players to find information. Improving workflows for collaboration and the ways that people work with each other. Being able to, as I mentioned before, like being able to actually really be able to integrate all these tons of features, but being able to make sure that we're able to do it in a way that, we want to make sure that, the game is still usable when we're adding all of these features. So, that's one of the things why I said it's important for us to revisit our user interface for the game. And looking at what other types of things could we do? What other design utilities could we provide? Things that could be helpful for design, for design? What other things can we do to make analysis better? And so really we have all these different roles that are really important into contributing to the next generation of Eterna, from players who are the players and researchers who are different types of subject matter experts, to really be able to say, what do they need for Eterna? The community developers who will be helping, who might contribute to actually to creating this software, as well as developers who we have on staff who is responsible for guiding it and maybe doing a lot of maybe a lot of the bigger amounts of work, but in tandem with additional assistance from the community. And then the designers in instructional design and game design and user interface design who will be able to make sure that we have an experience that's usable, really usable for everyone, and as effective as possible. And finally, is that, as I said, is that part of this is players and community contributors. So if you're looking to contribute, please do. We're very much open to community contributions and being able to ask questions and introduce people to our code bases and things of that nature and listen to ideas. So you can check out our code on GitHub, join the Discord where we're going to be really doing more of our discussion about development. And if you want to contribute as a developer in the community, go to Discord so that we can, if you have questions about the code or want to talk about some of the things that you could do. And then the forum, if you have ideas, post them in the forum, because otherwise, you can send them to me via direct message, but there's a chance that's going to get lost because there's so many ideas that have happened through the years, and the only way is to make sure that it's all written down. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, and I'll just talk to some of the questions here. I'll just answer this quickly from Astromon. Can we get the lab-related presentations out to players with lab access as soon as possible? Again, that will be just limited partially by what are the presenters allow, because there is some limitations there, so we'll have to coordinate with the presenters. And I've been talking to someone about the possibility of moving forward on how we'll do that. I'll try to do what I can to make sure that this stuff gets out, because I know it's important and there's a lot of useful information. I'll do what I can about that. From Leonard, interesting theory about abstracting away for details for greater satisfaction in player recruitment retention. It'll be a major challenge to model 3D without going in the opposite direction. And yeah, it will be hard. But I mean, even think of something like Fold It. There's a lot that they were able to do where, just the idea of voids, you want to keep things compact, and clashes, you don't want them to be, too close. Like there's a lot you can do there. It's certainly a hard challenge, but I think it's important for us and critical to our values of really making the science accessible and taking advantage of the collective intelligence of everyone when they might not typically be in this field, but they still have really valuable expertise and come at things with a different perspective. And another comment: exciting vision, but highlights need to prioritize. And yes, this was kind of somewhat of a 1,000-foot view, but I think to say this in a kind of to sum it up, I think for me personally, my point, my high level, the short and sweet point here is that we need to do more work to really get people involved in Eterna and able to contribute and to stay engaged. So we need to have better tutorials, because right now we're losing people very easily. They never get to the point where they're contributing. So we need to get them to that point. And then once they get to that point, is we need to have something fun that they enjoy working on. We need to improve the game, and then from there we need to have better tools so that people can be more effective. And what those things specifically mean, it's a little bit hard to say. And they're big tasks, and they will require a lot of work. But it is really, really important that we do it. And I'll repeat that for myself, and because I think it's important. There's a lot here to be done, but it's critical if we want to really move forward, because it's amazing what players are able to do right now with the system that we have in place. Because we know there's many flaws with it, but if we really put in the effort, in my opinion, to really go after these things, the abilities of players there'll be so much that players can do if we really allow more people to contribute. Riju made the point about, there's that 1 in 1,000 who really gets to the point of really making meaningful contributions, and they make really meaningful contributions, but we can improve that. There's so much that we could do. This doesn't have to be the way that Eterna works. It's not the nature of Eterna that it's 1 in 1,000. There's work to be done, and we can make that so much better. And there's so much that we can provide to players to make them more, even with the crazy stuff that they're able to do. If we make some improvements, we can make players, allow players to do so much more.
May I ask a question based on exactly that point? That was phenomenal, Jonathan. Your slide, next generation Eterna, you had the 5 entities. I wanted to ask, after Francesco Calavari's talk this morning, would you add any other bubbles to the top, given that what he said? how to reach constituents that we've never even thought about and what it would take to do that?
That's a good question that I don't have a great answer to.
Sure. Okay.
To some degree, I think that, and my particular, and in some ways, my particular opinion is that I think that some of the most powerful things that we can do to extend our reach to more people is to just make the Eterna experience more accessible for any one particular person coming in, because we can, there's a lot, and it's important for us to do things to reach out to people in other cultures and other situations and stuff like that. But I personally is that we're at a point where I think the biggest thing that we can do is make it easy, is really focus on, so you're coming into Eterna with very little knowledge. How can we get you to a point where you're able to make meaningful contributions? And that, we can expand our net to reach 100 million people, but we can do it's much more meaningful as if first we say we can retain 2 times, 5 times, 10 times as many people, and then when we reach out, we can then actually bring in more people. And I think and when you're talking about people who would not normally have access to things like Eterna, is things like education, that becomes an even bigger deal. But as far as that, is still something that we need to go after. And when we do go after there, to some degree, I think it's players still, but players from other demographics. It's researchers, but it's researchers or designers, but those with experience, or researchers, designers, developers, but those with experience in these areas of things like accessibility and things of that nature.
Thank you. There's a question from Leonard.
Yeah. Okay, so Chicken just asked about being an Eterna developer. Can you spend 1 to 2 minutes telling your story and that of MasterStorm, of how players who have coding skills can get involved and how that can end up progressing? Yeah, I don't want to, I want to be, I'm actually just looking at the time, I want to be a little bit careful about how much time that we still have our break. But yeah, so basically what it is that with both of us is that we just started contributing in many ways. And there was things that we found, in scripts where it's like there was something that somebody wanted to do in a script, or something that we wanted to do in scripts ourselves. So we went and we started learning, and we did it. And now, especially since we have public repositories where actually Eterna code lives, you can contribute to Eterna's code, right? And once, basically what happens is that you get to a point where, is that more and more, and it's great to be able to get that contribution. And as far as our particular becoming an actual Eterna developer, it was a point basically where it's, you're viewed as somebody who, like, okay, this is somebody who everyone trusts, and who has been able to make really meaningful contributions. And so they're identified, from the staff as saying, we can take, this is somebody who should be given more responsibility and who we want to bring on to be able to take their work to the next level. But the important thing, I think, is to just start off, and with any software development in general, start doing it, because you need developing those skills and then working with the people who who are able to guide you. Ome was huge, a huge benefit to me when I started. He was able to guide me, and I personally would love to be able to do what I can to help guide others.